Welcome to the Success in Africa podcast with Dr. Modupe, your weekly dose of leadership vitamins to make you successful in Africa.
Hello and welcome to the Success in Africa podcast, episode 34. My name is Dr. Modupe Taylor Pierce, and I am a scholar and practitioner of leadership and organizational development. Simply put, I study what makes people successful. I have been studying this for 3 decades with a particular focus on people in Africa, and in this podcast, I will share stories, lessons, and insights about people having success in Africa. Why this podcast? Because I am sick and tired of Africa being the poorest continent in the world. We are blessed with the greatest resource, young people. Africa will soon have the largest number of working age people in the world, and when these people achieve success, watch out. Africa's wealth will be unparalleled. Why? Because I don't know of too many Africans whose goal in life it is to die poor. See, success in life is simply the achievement of a predetermined goal, whether that goal is owning a house and a car, or creating employment for 1,000 people, or transforming your country into a high-income, low-corruption country. This podcast has been created to help you to achieve it. So, if you are serious about achieving success in Africa, I want you to subscribe to this channel. If you like this video after you've watched it, please click the like button. This podcast is brought to you courtesy of BCA Leadership, the largest leadership enhancement company in Africa. If you have questions that you want me to answer after watching this video, just log on to BCA Online, the link is on the screen, and post your questions there. That is where I will respond to your questions. Today we're continuing with our 5-part series on great employees. The 5 C's are called calling, character, culture, competence, and chemistry. In the last 3 weeks, we've dealt with calling, and then we explored character, and then we explored culture. Today, we're going to look at competence. Now, if you missed any of the last 3 episodes, that's episodes 31, 32, 33, I suggest that after you finish listening to this podcast, you go back, find them, and listen to them. So today we're talking about competence. Competence is defined as the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. Now, very few employers would argue about the need for competence in a potential employee. However, the challenge is how to identify competence. After all, I don't know of anybody who would inform a potential employer during an interview process that he or she is not competent for the job that they are interviewing for. See, every person has an area of competence. Trying to determine whether a person's area of competence aligns with the competence requirements of a specific job position based solely on a CV is highly inaccurate. Even the use of interviews alone have proven to be, frankly, less accurate. Now, some institutions, for example, the World Bank or African Leadership University, which have had success in recruiting people whose competence adequately matches the job positions for which they were hired, these institutions utilize assignments to determine the competence of their respective hires. In the case of African Leadership University, they would provide an assignment that a prospective candidate would be given 1 to 3 weeks to complete, and then they subject the candidate to a panel of interviews to discuss the assignment submission, and through that, they would assess the candidate's competent fitness for the job position. Now, the World Bank in the 1970s used to take an even longer view. They would give candidates 6-month assignments that would be completed under the supervision of a manager, after which the candidate's competence fitness would be assessed, and based on the assessment, the candidate would then be invited to take up a long-term position at the bank. This is how the World Bank attracted some of the most competent development economists and professionals to be able to wield huge influence over political economies across across the world. One person who went through this assessment process successfully in the 1970s was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Kingsley Yao Amoako, or more commonly, K.Y. Amoako. KY, as he is fondly called, hails from Ghana. He was born in 1944, and from an early age, he was fascinated by economics and nation building. His father was a big fan of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and KY was influenced by his father's beliefs in the importance of educational excellence as a tool to liberate humans from poverty. He worked hard in his studies, and after excelling in his university studies at the University of Ghana at Legon, he was given the opportunity to study at the University of California, Berkeley in the United States, where he eventually attained a PhD in economics. KY's academic excellence and competence did not go unnoticed by his professors and mentors, and they helped to nudge him towards a career at the World Bank. Now, the World Bank had previously limited its hirings to white, Western, mid-career professionals, but in the early 1970s, it recognized the need to broaden its employee profile, and they started to hire younger professionals of non-white heritage. KY was selected to go through an assignment and assessment process, and after 1 year of assessment, he was given a long-term position at the bank. His competence in various roles at the bank over the next few years paved the way for him to be elevated to a highly coveted director-level position at the World Bank, after which he was then recruited by the Secretary General of the United Nations at the time, Dr. Boutros Ghali, to head the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, or ECA. KY served as the Executive Secretary of the ECA for 10 years at a rank of Under Secretary General for the United Nations. During that 10-year span, he turned around the ECA. He made it more relevant to development efforts in Africa. Under KY's leadership, initiatives like the Africa Peer Review Mechanism, the African Development Forum, and the New Partnership for Africa's Development, or NEPAD, were launched successfully, some of which exist even today and continue to have a positive impact on Africa's growth and development. After retiring from the United Nations, KY Amoako founded the Africa Center for Economic Transformation, or ACET, and which is a Pan-African economic institute supporting Africa's long-term growth and development. ACET produces research, it offers policy advice, and connects key stakeholders so that African countries are better positioned for smart, inclusive, and sustainable development. Now you see, all of these things may not have been possible if KY Amoako had not demonstrated his competence during his period of assessment with the World Bank. So what can we learn from the journey of Dr. Amoako? First, we can learn that excellence matters, and competence is the consistent demonstration of excellence. You see, by working hard in school and honing his skills in his chosen field, KY became more competent. At the World Bank, he demonstrated a commitment to competence by ensuring that the assignments he was given were completed to a level of quality that was expected and within the time limits that were required. In fact, this commitment to quality and timeliness at one time almost came at the expense of his health, where KY actually worked himself into a serious health crisis. Thankfully, he recovered from it and he was able to resume work months later. In fact, his employers were willing to pay for his medical bills and wait for him to recover because they knew that they had a competent worker in KY. We also learn from KY's journey at the ECA that to be competent, one has to be a constant learner. You see, even though he had graduated from a prestigious university with a PhD, KY did not assume that he knew everything, and he was and continued to be an avid learner and reader. At the Economic Commission for Africa, he had to be an avid learner because he had to learn Africa as a continent, the various parts of Africa, what was driving development and economies, in order to devise optimal strategies for making the ECA relevant and impactful. You see, folks, when looking for competent workers, don't just assess current competence, but also look for employees or partners who are willing, able, and keen to keep learning and expanding their skills and knowledge. Africa is too vast, too complex, and changing, frankly, too fast for anyone to be able to afford to rest on the knowledge they have today, no matter how vast that knowledge is. Because what we know today about any part of Africa or any industry may well become obsolete in 5 years. So, to find partners or employees with competent, yes, conduct assignments to assess the prospect's current competence, and also ask questions to unearth the prospect's willingness to learn. This way, you will acquire the right person who is not only competent for today's assignment, but will stay competent for tomorrow's challenge, just like Dr. K.Y. Amwako. Folks, this brings us to the end of our podcast today. Next week, we will conclude our series on the 5 C's of a great employee to help you as you build your company or organization in Africa. Thank you for listening or watching. I hope you've learned something from today's podcast that is useful, and you can certainly use it to help you build your organization in Africa. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and like this video. Please tell your friends about it, because together we can transform our beloved continent of Africa. See you next week.
Tomorrow belongs to those people who prepare for it today. See you next week.